The screen flashes with flames shaped like wings. A slow, rising heat hums beneath a quiet voice. They thought his fire peaked at potential. They were wrong. Yo, ChronoCrew Legends, it's your boy Chronos, and today we're diving into part 2 of What If Deku Had a Mutated Flame Quirk. So if you're ready to ride the heat wave, drop a like. 150 likes unlocks part 3. Subscribe and become a full-fledged ChronoCrew Legend. Ring that bell so you don't miss the next eruption in the timeline. Grab your notebook, your snack, your hype, and let's burn through the story together. Izuku's recovery from the USJ incident took 3 days. A testament to both Recovery Girl's extraordinary healing quirk and the resilience he'd built through years of training. When he was finally cleared to return to class, he found the atmosphere at UA had subtly shifted. The villain attack had dispelled any lingering notions that their hero education would be sheltered or theoretical. As you've all experienced firsthand, Aizawa addressed them, his face still partially bandaged. The threats you'll face as professionals are very real. The League of Villains specifically targeted this facility, demonstrating both organization and resources beyond typical villain operations. He surveyed the unusually quiet classroom. In light of recent events, the faculty has decided to accelerate certain aspects of your training while simultaneously providing you with time to process what occurred. Therefore, classes will be modified for the next week, with emphasis on combat readiness and psychological resilience. This announcement sparked murmurs throughout the room, but Aizawa silenced them with a raised hand. Additionally, you'll be given extended independent training periods. Use this time wisely to reflect on your performance during the USJ incident and address any weaknesses you identified. As Aizawa concluded his announcements, Izuku found himself torn between analytical reflection and a burning determination that had intensified since facing genuine villains. The USJ incident had shown him exactly how far he still needed to go, and how little time he might have to get there. After classes, Katsuki caught up with him in the hallway. "You going to Dagoba for extra training?" he asked, his tone casual but eyes intense. Izuku nodded. "I need to work on my output regulation. The Nomu showed me that controlled power isn't always enough. Sometimes you need raw, overwhelming force." "About time you figured that out," Katsuki smirked, though there was no malice in it. "I've been telling you that for years, and you've been right," Izuku admitted. "But it's also about balance. What happened to Aizawa-sensei proved that technique alone can't compensate for power disparities beyond a certain threshold." Katsuki considered this, then offered unexpectedly, "Want a sparring partner tomorrow? I've got some new applications I want to test too." The offer surprised Izuku. While they trained together occasionally, Katsuki usually preferred developing techniques independently. "Definitely. 4 o'clock at the beach." "I'll be there," Katsuki confirmed before heading toward the exit. "Don't hold back, Izuku. After USJ, none of us can afford to." Those words stayed with Izuku as he made his way to Dagoba Beach that afternoon. The once trash-strewn shoreline now gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its transformation a physical manifestation of his own journey. Unlike the crowded public portions, this secluded area remained perfect for training. Open space, varied terrain, and relative privacy. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Izuku stood barefoot in the sand, flames dancing across his fingertips as he centered himself. The USJ battle replayed in his mind. His Nova shield shattering against the Nomu's punch, the sensation of ribs cracking upon impact with the wall, the terrifying realization that his strongest techniques had barely registered against the bioengineered monster. "Not enough," he murmured, closing his eyes. "I need more." The flames around his hands intensified, spreading up his arms. Historically, Izuku had focused on precision and control, containing his fire to specific body parts for maximum efficiency. But watching All Might overcome the Nomu had crystallized something he'd always understood intellectually but never fully embraced. Sometimes heroism required everything you had, without reservation. Inhaling deeply, Izuku extended his awareness throughout his body, feeling the latent heat that always simmered beneath his skin. Instead of channeling it to specific points as usual, he let it rise simultaneously from every pore. Flame on! Fire erupted across his entire body at once, engulfing him in a swirling cocoon of controlled flame. The sensation was exhilarating, like stepping into a warm bath that moved with him rather than against him. Unlike his usual targeted applications, this full-body ignition created a unified field that responded to his movements as a cohesive whole. Moving through basic forms, Izuku discovered immediate advantages. His reaction time improved dramatically without the need to consciously direct flames to specific body parts. The heat envelope created natural offensive and defensive capabilities simultaneously. Most significantly, his aerial mobility increased exponentially, the unified flame propulsion launching him higher and faster than his previous methods. For nearly an hour, he practiced maintaining the flame on state while executing increasingly complex maneuvers. Aerial spins, rapid direction changes, hovering patterns, each movement revealing new possibilities and limitations. The fire responded almost intuitively to his intentions, as if his mental connection to his quirk had deepened through this more holistic approach. The main drawback became apparent quickly: energy consumption. Maintaining full-body ignition drained his stamina faster than his typical targeted applications. Even with years of endurance training, Izuku found himself needing brief recovery periods after particularly intensive sequences. As twilight deepened into dusk, he landed on the shoreline, extinguishing his flames to assess his condition. His breathing was heavy, sweat evaporating instantly from his still heated skin, but his mind was racing with potential applications and refinements. The key is finding the right balance, he noted in his training journal, sketching diagrams of flame distribution patterns. Full-body ignition provides mobility and reaction advantages, but consumes energy exponentially faster than targeted application. Optimal usage might be short bursts for evasion or rapid assault, followed by more efficient targeted techniques for sustained combat. He continued documenting his observations, including energy conservation strategies and transition techniques between full and partial ignition states. By the time darkness had fully descended, Izuku had developed a preliminary framework for incorporating this new approach into his existing combat methodology. Walking home under starlight, his muscles pleasantly fatigued, Izuku felt a renewed sense of purpose. The USJ attack had been a harsh reminder of the real dangers awaiting professional heroes, but it had also clarified his path forward. Power without control was destructive, but control without sufficient power was ineffective against truly formidable opponents. "I need both," he resolved as the lights of his apartment building came into view. "And I will have both." The following day's sparring session with Katsuki proved the perfect testing ground for Izuku's new flame on technique. They met at Dagoba as planned, both arriving early to warm up independently before engaging. "New technique?" Katsuki inquired, noting the altered flame patterns during Izuku's preparatory exercises. Izuku nodded. "Full-body ignition for mobility and rapid response. Still refining the energy efficiency, but it adds options." "Show me," Katsuki challenged, palms already crackling with controlled explosions. What followed was less a traditional sparring match than a high-speed technical demonstration. Katsuki's explosive acceleration met Izuku's newfound aerial agility in a spectacular exchange that sent sand flying and steam hissing into the afternoon air. Neither held back significantly, they knew each other's limits too well for that, but the focus remained on technical exploration rather than victory. Midway through the session, Katsuki paused to offer unexpected critique. "Your full ignition gives you better mobility, but you're creating unnecessary turbulence. Streamline the flame pattern along your spine and legs. You'll get better thrust-to-energy ratio." The suggestion surprised Izuku. While Katsuki had always been observant, he rarely offered technical advice so directly. "USJ changed things," Katsuki said, seemingly reading Izuku's thoughts. "Those weren't playground villains. The League will be back, probably stronger. We both need to level up faster than we planned." Izuku absorbed this insight, recognizing the truth in it. "You're right about the turbulence. I've been igniting uniformly instead of adapting flame density to function." Implementing the adjustment, Izuku discovered immediate improvement. By concentrating flame density along his major movement axis while maintaining lighter heat distribution elsewhere, he could extend his flame on duration significantly without sacrificing mobility. Their sparring resumed with renewed intensity, each pushing the other to refine techniques in real time. Katsuki unveiled his own innovations: a controlled explosive rotation that generated surprising maneuverability, and a precision blast technique that minimized collateral impact without sacrificing power. As the sun began to set, both young heroes were exhausted but satisfied. They sat on the shoreline, catching their breath while discussing technical nuances and potential applications. "The sports festival is coming up," Katsuki noted casually, though Izuku detected the competitive edge beneath his tone. These new techniques should make things interesting. Izuku had almost forgotten about the UA Sports Festival, one of Japan's most watched sporting events and a crucial opportunity for hero students to attract professional attention. After the USJ incident, it had seemed almost secondary, but Katsuki's reminder reignited his competitive spirit. It will, Izuku agreed, though we'll need to be careful about revealing too much. Pro heroes will be watching, but so will potential enemies. Katsuki scoffed. Always overthinking. Just win your matches. That's what matters. They parted ways as darkness fell, each carrying new insights from their exchange. But while Katsuki seemed focused primarily on the upcoming competition, Izuku's mind had already expanded beyond it. The sports festival would be important, yes, but it was also just one step in a longer journey. That night, staring at his bedroom ceiling, Izuku found himself contemplating not just techniques and applications, but the fundamental nature of his quirk. Fire was traditionally viewed as destructive, a force that consumed and destroyed, yet it also brought light, warmth, and protection. The duality had always fascinated him, informing his approach to quirk development. What if, he whispered to himself, what if there's more to it than just creating and controlling flames? With that question echoing in his mind, he drifted into sleep, dreams filled with swirling fire and possibilities yet unexplored. The following days established a rhythm. Academic classes in the morning, specialized hero training in the afternoon, and independent development in the evenings. While his classmates focused primarily on refining existing techniques, Izuku found himself drawn toward more fundamental exploration of his quirk's nature. On the third evening of their training week, Izuku arrived at Dagoba Beach earlier than usual. The setting sun cast everything in golden light as he settled into a meditative posture on the sand, closed his eyes, and focused inward. Most quirk users developed an intuitive understanding of their abilities through usage, but few explored the underlying principles with scientific rigor. Izuku had always been different, his analytical nature driving him to question mechanisms others took for granted. Fire isn't just combustion, he murmured, feeling the internal heat that was his quirk's baseline state. It's energy transformation, molecular excitation, plasma generation. As he concentrated, tiny flames appeared across his skin. Not the controlled bursts of his combat techniques, but a gentle, almost curious manifestation of his power. He allowed his awareness to sink deeper, past the familiar sensations of heat and into the subtle differences between flame states. There was the quick, hot burn he used for explosive techniques, the steady, controlled flame of his mobility applications, and something else, a deeper, more intense heat that he'd only touched upon during his most powerful attacks. Solar core, he whispered, intuitively naming this deeper energy state. Focusing on this sensation, Izuku carefully increased his quirk's output, not outward as usual but inward, concentrating heat within his core rather than expressing it externally. The temperature around him began to rise, creating a visible heat haze though no flames were visible. The sand beneath him started to crystallize from the intense heat, tiny glass formations spreading outward in a perfect circle. Yet rather than feeling drained, Izuku experienced a curious buildup of potential energy, as if he were becoming a vessel for something greater than his standard flames. It's like compression, he realized, but instead of compressing flames for external release, I'm compressing heat energy within myself. The pressure continued building, creating an almost tangible aura of heat that distorted the air around him. Birds taking evening flight actively diverted their paths to avoid the zone of increasing temperature. When Izuku finally opened his eyes, they glowed with inner fire, not metaphorically, but literally, as if the compressed heat had found expression through them. He raised a hand, observing how the air shimmered around it without any visible flame manifestation. Solar flare, he named the technique, standing slowly. With deliberate focus, he channeled a portion of the compressed energy outward through his extended palm. What emerged wasn't his usual flame. Instead, a concentrated heat beam cut across the beach, instantly melting a line of sand into glass without any accompanying fire or smoke. The precision was extraordinary, but Izuku immediately recognized the limitations. Maintaining this compressed state required intense concentration and generated significant internal pressure. It wasn't sustainable for extended periods without risking overheating his own body. Carefully releasing the compression, he allowed his quirk to return to its normal state, flames briefly dancing across his skin as the transition completed. Though physically taxed by the experiment, Izuku felt a surge of excitement about the implications. It's not just about flames, he wrote in his journal later that evening. My quirk generates heat energy that I typically express as fire, but that's not the only possible manifestation. By compressing heat internally before expression, I can create effects more akin to focused radiation than traditional combustion. He sketched diagrams of the technique, noting potential applications and safety parameters. Unlike his flame-on approach, which prioritized distribution and mobility, this solar flare technique represented the opposite end of the spectrum: absolute concentration and precision. The challenge will be transitioning between states efficiently, he concluded. Each represents a different aspect of my quirk's potential, but the energy requirements and control parameters are vastly different. Over the next several days, Izuku alternated between refining these contrasting approaches, gradually developing transition techniques that allowed him to shift from one state to another with minimal energy loss. The more he practiced, the more intuitive the process became, as if he were discovering natural aspects of his quirk rather than forcing new applications. By the end of the training week, he had established a functional framework that incorporated both innovations into his existing methodology. Flame-on provided mobility and versatility, while solar flare offered precision and penetrating power when needed. His baseline techniques bridged the gap between these extremes, allowing for tactical flexibility based on situation. The evening before classes resumed their normal schedule, Toshinori Yagi visited Dagoba Beach to observe Izuku's progress. The gaunt man watched from a respectful distance as Izuku demonstrated his expanded capabilities, his blue eyes thoughtful beneath his prominent brow. Impressive evolution, young Midoriya, he commented as Izuku landed beside him after a particularly complex aerial sequence. You've taken the USJ experience as motivation rather than discouragement. I had to, Izuku replied, extinguishing his flames. The gap between where I am and where I need to be was made very clear that day. Toshinori nodded, understanding. Every hero faces that realization at some point. The villains you'll encounter won't conveniently match your current capabilities. They'll exploit every weakness and limitation they can identify, which is why I need to eliminate those limitations, Izuku stated with quiet determination, or at least understand them well enough to compensate strategically. They walked along the shoreline as twilight deepened, discussing technical aspects of Izuku's new approaches and potential applications in various scenarios. Throughout their conversation, Izuku couldn't help noticing something different in Toshinori's demeanor, a subtle tension that hadn't been present in their earlier interactions. Mr. Yagi, he finally ventured, is everything all right? You seem concerned about something. Toshinori hesitated, his gaunt face momentarily troubled before he composed himself. Just professional worries, young man. The USJ attack has raised security concerns throughout UA. There was truth in the statement, but Izuku sensed it wasn't the complete explanation. Still, he respected his mentor too much to press further. The sports festival is still proceeding as planned, Toshinori continued, changing the subject. An important opportunity for you to demonstrate your growth on a public stage, and for villains to gather intelligence on UA students, Izuku noted shrewdly. Toshinori's eyebrows rose slightly. An astute observation. Yes, that's a calculated risk the school is taking. However, canceling such a significant event would send a message of fear that might embolden our enemies further. The implications weren't lost on Izuku. So we're bait. Participants in a necessary demonstration of strength and resilience, Toshinori corrected gently. The security measures being implemented are extraordinary. I assure you. They continued walking in thoughtful silence until reaching the steps leading away from the beach. Young Midoriya, Toshinori said as they prepared to part ways, I've watched your development with great interest since our first meeting. Your growth has been remarkable, not just in quirk application but in tactical thinking and heroic instinct. The unexpected praise caused Izuku to flush slightly. Thank you, sir. I couldn't have come this far without your guidance. My guidance may have provided direction, Toshinori acknowledged, but the work, the blood, sweat, and innovation, that was all you. His expression grew serious. The path ahead will test you in ways we cannot fully anticipate. Trust your training, but also trust your heart. It has guided you well thus far. With those enigmatic words, he bid Izuku good night and departed, leaving the young hero contemplative as darkness settled over Dagoba Beach. The following weeks passed in a blur of preparation as UA geared up for the sports festival. Classes maintained their rigorous pace while incorporating specialized training related to the upcoming events. Though the exact nature of the competitions remained confidential, historical patterns suggested a combination of individual and team challenges designed to showcase various aspects of heroic capability. Throughout this period, Izuku continued refining his new techniques while developing tactical approaches for various competition scenarios. His classmates similarly intensified their preparations, the classroom often filled with discussions of strategy and Quirk applications when teachers weren't present. The morning of the sports festival arrived with perfect weather and unprecedented security measures. As Class 1A gathered in their designated waiting room, the atmosphere crackled with nervous energy and competitive spirit. "Man, I'm so pumped," Kirishima exclaimed, hardening and unhardening his arms in excitement. "The whole country will be watching us today, which means maintaining class dignity is essential," Ida added seriously, chopping the air with characteristic intensity. "We must demonstrate the qualities that make UA the premier hero institution." Across the room, Todoroki had been silently observing his classmates until he abruptly approached Izuku. "Midoriya," he said without preamble, objectively speaking, "I'm stronger than you." The direct challenge silenced nearby conversations as students turned to observe this unexpected confrontation. "My control over ice is perfect, and my raw power exceeds most pro heroes," Todoroki continued, heterochromatic eyes fixed on Izuku. "I'll win today without using my left side." The statement wasn't delivered as a boast but as a cold declaration of intent. Everyone present understood the implication. Todoroki was deliberately handicapping himself by refusing to use his fire abilities, yet still expected victory. Before Izuku could respond, Katsuki interjected from nearby. "Pretty arrogant, half and half. Planning your victory speech before the competition even starts." Todoroki's expression remained unchanged. "It's not arrogance. It's assessment." "It's bullshit," Katsuki countered bluntly. "You think you can win with half your quirk? Against me? Against Izuku? That's not confidence, that's delusion." The tension in the room intensified as students watched this confrontation between three of their strongest classmates. Izuku, however, was focused on something beyond the competitive challenge. A flicker of pain he'd caught in Todoroki's eyes when mentioning his left side. "Todoroki," Izuku said quietly, "your quirk is your own. How you use it is your choice. But don't insult the rest of us by assuming victory is guaranteed regardless of how much effort you invest." He stepped closer, voice lowering further. "And don't insult yourself by fighting with artificial limitations based on reasons that have nothing to do with this competition." Todoroki's eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine emotion he displayed during the exchange. Before he could respond, however, the intercom announced it was time to proceed to the stadium. As they filed out, Katsuki fell into step beside Izuku. "What was that about? You know something about half-and-half's issues?" Izuku shook his head. "Just intuition. There's something personal behind his refusal to use his fire side. Something painful." "Not our problem," Katsuki shrugged. "If he wants to handicap himself, that's his funeral." Yet despite his dismissive words, Izuku noticed Katsuki casting thoughtful glances toward Todoroki as they entered the stadium tunnel. Beneath his aggressive exterior, Katsuki possessed sharp observational skills and a surprisingly nuanced understanding of people's motivations when he bothered to apply it. The roar of the crowd was deafening as Class 1A emerged into the massive UA stadium. Tens of thousands of spectators filled the stands, with millions more watching via broadcast. Present mix enthusiastic commentary boomed over the speakers, introducing the first-year classes with characteristic hyperbole. "And here they are, folks. The students who survived a villain attack through sheer grit and determination. The rising stars of the hero world. UA's Class 1A." The spotlight felt both exhilarating and intimidating as they took their places in the central arena. Izuku scanned the audience, identifying sections reserved for pro heroes and agency representatives, the very people whose attention could shape career trajectories after graduation. Once all classes had assembled, Midnight took the stage as the festival's chief referee. After explaining the overall structure, a preliminary qualifying round followed by tournament-style finals, she announced the first event, an obstacle race around the stadium perimeter. The first 42 students to complete the course advanced to the next round, she declared with theatrical flair. "Anything goes as long as you stay on the course. Ready yourselves at the starting gate." As students jostled for position in the narrow starting tunnel, Izuku found himself analyzing the format. The bottleneck design would create immediate congestion, favoring those with quirks that facilitated rapid breakout. Following that, unknown obstacles would test adaptability and quirk versatility. Strategic options crystallized in his mind. He could use Flame On for an immediate aerial advantage, bypassing the crowd entirely, but that would reveal one of his new techniques immediately. Alternatively, he could start conventionally and save his innovations for later obstacles where they might provide greater advantage. The decision came down to risk assessment. Failing to qualify wasn't an option, not with his goals and the expectations he'd established. Better to secure advancement now and manage exposure during later stages. Start! Midnight's voice cracked like a whip, and the race began. As predicted, the narrow exit created immediate chaos as students pushed and shoved for position. Izuku activated Flame On without hesitation, the full-body ignition launching him vertically above the crowd before transitioning to forward propulsion. Below, he glimpsed Todoroki creating an ice path that simultaneously propelled him forward while freezing competitors in place. Katsuki similarly used explosions to launch himself above the melee, eyes narrowing when he spotted Izuku already airborne. The first obstacle appeared, massive robots like those from the entrance exam, including several towering zero-pointers blocking the path. While most students hesitated, Todoroki froze one giant robot mid-step, creating a precarious situation as it began toppling toward following competitors. Izuku, maintaining his aerial trajectory, faced a split-second decision. The falling robot threatened several students caught in its shadow, including Kirishima and Tetsu from Class 1B. Direct intervention would cost valuable time and position, but ignoring the danger violated his fundamental principles. Hero first, competitor second, he murmured, adjusting his course. Diving toward the falling robot, Izuku concentrated flame output to his hands and feet. Fire Fist, double strike, he called, delivering twin flame-enhanced punches to the robot's center mass. The force redirected its falling trajectory away from the students below while maintaining its forward momentum, effectively clearing the path without endangering others. The maneuver cost him position, with Todoroki and Katsuki now ahead, but the seconds lost were worth the outcome. As he resumed his forward flight, Izuku caught appreciative nods from several pro-heroes in the observation stands. The second obstacle was a massive canyon traversed by narrow tightropes. Most students slowed considerably here, carefully balancing across the precarious paths. Izuku maintained his aerial approach, though he reduced flame intensity to conserve energy. The sustained Flame On was proving more draining than anticipated in a race scenario. By the third obstacle, a minefield requiring careful navigation, Izuku had settled into third position behind Todoroki and Katsuki, who were engaged in their own fierce battle for the lead. The explosive mines presented minimal challenge for someone with aerial mobility, but maintaining height while preserving sufficient energy for the final sprint required precise calculations. As the finish line came into view, Izuku made his move. Extinguishing his full-body flames, he redirected all energy output into a concentrated burst from his feet and lower back. Nova Thrust. The explosive acceleration launched him forward with tremendous speed, overtaking both Katsuki and Todoroki in a final sprint that carried him across the finish line mere fractions of a second before them. And in a stunning finish, Izuku Midoriya takes first place. Present Mix voice thundered throughout the stadium. What an incredible display of quirk control and strategic thinking. Exhausted but triumphant, Izuku allowed his flames to extinguish completely as he caught his breath. The crowd's cheers washed over him, a far cry from the isolation he'd experienced during his early quirk development years. Yet amid the celebration, his thoughts were already turning toward the next challenge. Katsuki landed beside him, breathing heavily with irritation evident in his expression. Lucky final burst, he growled, though there was reluctant respect beneath the complaint. Calculated risk, Izuku corrected with a small smile. Knew you'd be focused on Todoroki and wouldn't expect a sprint finish. Todoroki joined them moments later, his face impassive despite his third-place finish. He regarded Izuku silently for a moment before speaking. You diverted from optimal race strategy to ensure those students weren't harmed by the robot. It wasn't a question, but Izuku nodded confirmation. Being first doesn't matter if it comes at others' expense. Something flickered in Todoroki's mismatched eyes, not quite understanding, but perhaps the beginning of reassessment. Before their exchange could continue, Midnight called for the qualified students to assemble for the announcement of the second event. The cavalry battle presented an entirely different challenge. Team-based competition where students formed groups of 2 to 4, creating horse and rider formations to capture headbands from opponents. Point values assigned to each student based on their preliminary ranking meant Izuku, as first-place finisher, was worth a staggering 10 million points, making him everyone's primary target. "You're screwed, Izuku," Katsuki noted with undisguised schadenfreude. "Everyone's coming for your head." "Not necessarily," Izuku countered, mind already analyzing potential team compositions. "It creates an opportunity to demonstrate defensive capabilities rather than just offensive power." As students scrambled to form teams, Izuku found himself approached by Uraraka, whose determined expression suggested she had specific reasons for seeking him out. "Let's team up, Midoriya," she proposed enthusiastically. "Your mobility combined with my zero gravity could create a super maneuverable formation, even knowing I've got the 10 million point target on my back?" Izuku asked, surprised by her eagerness. Uraraka's smile was genuine. "That just makes it more exciting. Besides, I've seen how you fight. If anyone can defend that headband, it's you." They were soon joined by Tokoyami, whose Dark Shadow offered excellent defensive capabilities, and Hatsum from the support department, whose babies, custom-designed support items, provided additional mobility options. As they strategized, Izuku observed other team formations taking shape. Katsuki had assembled an offensive powerhouse with Kirishima, Shiro, and Ashido. Todoroki similarly created a balanced team with Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Kaminari. Each configuration reflected different strategic priorities: offense, defense, or specialized tactical approaches. "Our primary objective is defensive," Izuku explained to his team. "Everyone will be targeting us from the start, so mobility and protective capability are essential." He outlined a formation utilizing Hatsum's hover boots for ground mobility, Uraraka's zero gravity to reduce weight constraints, and Tokoyami's Dark Shadow as a multi-directional defense system. His own role would combine rider responsibilities with precision flame deployment for evasion and counterpressure. "What about your full-body flame technique from the race?" Tokoyami inquired. "Wouldn't that provide additional mobility?" Izuku shook his head. "Too energy-intensive for a 15-minute event, and the heat might impair Dark Shadow's effectiveness since it's vulnerable to light. Better to use targeted applications as needed." When the cavalry battle began, the outcome was exactly as predicted. Every team immediately converged on Izuku's formation with single-minded determination. The opening minutes became a chaotic melee as multiple groups attempted simultaneous captures of the 10 million point headband. "Hold formation," Izuku called as they executed tight, evasive maneuvers, Dark Shadow batting away approaching hands while Hatsum's support items provided bursts of speed and directional changes. Team Todoroki mounted the most coordinated early assault, with Yaoyorozu creating a capture pole while Kaminari prepared an electrical discharge to disrupt their defenses. Recognizing the threat, Izuku responded with precision. "Uraraka, right shift on my mark. Tokoyami, full extension rear guard. 3, 2, 1, mark." Their formation pivoted sharply right as Izuku released a controlled flame burst from his left hand, creating both propulsion and a thermal barrier that disrupted Todoroki's approach. Simultaneously, Dark Shadow expanded to block Yaoyorozu's capture attempt, its malleable form wrapping protectively around their formation's rear. This pattern continued throughout the event, coordinated defense against increasingly desperate attacks as the clock ticked down. Team Bakugo made several explosive attempts, each more aggressive than the last, while other teams employed various Quirk combinations to penetrate their defenses. With 1 minute remaining, Todoroki mounted a final, all-out offensive. Ice spread rapidly across the ground toward them, while Ida announced a special technique he'd been saving. Recipro burst! The engine-legged students' extraordinary acceleration caught them momentarily off guard, creating an opening for Todoroki to reach for Izuku's headband. In that critical moment, Izuku made an instinctive decision. Rather than using standard flames, he briefly activated Solar Flare, the concentrated heat instantly melting Todoroki's approaching ice while creating a momentary pressure zone that disrupted Ida's charge. The defensive success came at a cost. The intense energy expenditure left Izuku momentarily drained as the final seconds ticked away. In that vulnerable moment, a precisely timed attack from Team Bakugo succeeded in snatching their headband with just seconds remaining on the clock. "Got it!" Katsuki crowed triumphantly as his team retreated with their prize. Explosion-propelled movement carrying them beyond immediate counterattack range. With no time for recovery, Izuku made a rapid strategic assessment. Hatsum maximum thrust. Uraraka zero everyone. Tokoyami. Interception pattern. Their formation suddenly lightened as Uraraka applied her quirk to all members, allowing Hatsum's devices to propel them at unprecedented speed. Rather than pursuing Team Bakugo, however, Izuku directed them toward Team Monoma from Class 1B, who had accumulated several headbands through clever quirk copying. Dark Shadow extended with perfect timing, snatching 2 headbands from the surprised Monoma before the final horn sounded. "Time's up," Present Mike announced as the dust settled. "Let's see who's advancing to the tournament finals." Team Bakugo placed first with the 10 million points plus their original value. Team Todoroki secured second with a substantial collection. Team Midoriya, despite losing their primary headband, had secured enough points from Team Monoma to claim third place, ensuring advancement to the tournament round. As they caught their breath, Uraraka offered encouraging words. "That was amazing teamwork. We almost made it the whole way with the 10 million. Almost isn't good enough," Izuku replied, though without bitterness. "But you're right about the teamwork. Thank you all for believing we could defend that target." Tokoyami nodded respectfully. "Your strategic adaptation was impressive. When circumstances changed, you immediately formulated an alternative approach rather than pursuing a lost cause." These words resonated with Izuku as they awaited the tournament matchup announcements. Adaptation had always been central to his quirk development, finding ways to apply fire beyond its obvious destructive potential. The coming one-on-one battles would test not just power, but the full spectrum of capabilities he'd cultivated. The tournament bracket revealed his first opponent, Hitoshi Shinso from General Studies. Unlike the hero course students, Shinso's quirk remained unknown, a significant tactical disadvantage for Izuku's preparation. During the lunch break, as other students discussed strategy and potential matchups, Ojiro approached Izuku with unexpected information. "Be careful with Shinso," the martial arts specialist warned quietly. "His quirk is brainwashing. If you respond to anything he says, he can take control of your actions." That's how he advanced through the cavalry battle. The revelation was concerning. Mind control represented one of the most difficult quirks to counter once activated. "Why are you telling me this?" Izuku asked. Ojiro's expression was solemn. "Because losing to his quirk feels wrong, like your body isn't yours anymore. No one should experience that without warning." Izuku thanked him for the information, mind already formulating countermeasures. A quirk that activated through verbal response created both limitations and opportunities. The key would be maintaining vigilance while finding alternative methods of expression if necessary. When the tournament matches began, the stadium energy reached fever pitch. Millions watched worldwide as UA's most promising first-years prepared to showcase their abilities in direct competition. First match: Izuku Midoriya versus Hitoshi Shinso. Present mix announcement echoed throughout the venue as Izuku took his position on the concrete stage. Across from him, Shinso's expression held calculated confidence. "So you're the famous flame user from Class 1A," he called, voice pitched to carry clearly. "Must be nice having a flashy quirk that everyone admires from childhood." Izuku remained silent, recognizing the provocation for what it was, an attempt to trigger the verbal response that would activate brainwashing. Instead, he assumed a ready stance, flames flickering subtly around his fists as he awaited Midnight's starting signal. "Nothing to say?" Shinso continued, his tone sharpening. "Typical hero course student, looking down on everyone else. You elite types are all the same, born lucky and never understanding what it's like to struggle against society's expectations." The words were carefully chosen to provoke emotional response, targeting potential insecurities. Izuku focused on his breathing, maintaining composed silence despite the increasingly personal provocations. "Begin," Midnight announced, officially starting the match. Shinso immediately shifted tactics. "Giving me the silent treatment won't help when we're fighting," he called, approaching with careful footwork. "But I guess that's what people like you do. Ignore those you consider beneath you." Izuku advanced methodically, maintaining his guard while closing distance without verbal engagement. His strategy was straightforward: maintain silence, close to grappling range, and secure a ring-out victory without excessive force. No need for elaborate flame techniques against an opponent whose primary weapon was psychological. When they were approximately 2 meters apart, Shinso played his final card. I wonder what your mother would think. Seeing her son too arrogant to even speak to his opponent? Is that the kind of hero she raised? The mention of his mother triggered an instinctive response before Izuku could suppress it. Don't, he began, then froze as Shinso's quirk activated instantly. A cold, detached sensation washed over him as his consciousness was pushed aside. His body remained upright but no longer under his control, awaiting commands from the quirk's user. Turn around and walk out of bounds, Shinso instructed, satisfaction evident in his voice. To his horror, Izuku felt his body complying, turning mechanically toward the boundary line and beginning a steady walk toward self-elimination. His mind remained fully aware, screaming futile commands to muscles that no longer recognized his authority. Is this it? He thought desperately. Eliminated without even using my quirk? Because of one moment of weakness? As his feet carried him inexorably toward the boundary, something stirred within Izuku. Not just mental resistance, but a physical reaction. The internal heat that was his quirk's baseline state began intensifying of its own accord, responding to his emotional distress despite the brainwashing effect. Memories flashed through his mind. Years of dedicated training, the pride in his mother's eyes when he received his UA acceptance, Toshinori's guidance, Katsuki's challenging rivalry, the USJ attack that had shown how far he still needed to go. Just one step from the boundary line, something unprecedented occurred. Without conscious direction, Izuku's quirk activated in its solar flare configuration, the compressed internal heat generating a sudden pressure wave that momentarily disrupted all external influences, including Shinso's mental control. In that fraction of a second, Izuku regained awareness of his body. Flames erupted from his fingertips as he fought to reassert control, the pain of sudden quirk activation helping anchor his consciousness against the brainwashing effect. He stopped, one foot hovering just above the out-of-bounds line, and turned to face Shinso with flames now dancing across his shoulders and arms. Your quirk controlled me? Izuku's voice emerged as a low growl, building in intensity as the flames brightened. Who decided that? The stadium fell silent at the unexpected reversal and the palpable pressure emanating from Izuku's form. The heat haze surrounding him created a mirage-like effect, making his outline waver as if reality itself struggled to contain the energy he was generating. Shinso's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible! No one breaks free from my brainwashing by themselves. Izuku advanced slowly, each step leaving momentary scorch marks on the concrete. A hero can't afford to be controlled, not by villains, not by circumstances, and certainly not by self-doubt. The solar flare state intensified, creating a pressure aura that pushed outward invisible heat waves. Unlike his usual flame manifestations, this technique expressed power through presence rather than direct combustion. A profound weight of contained energy that made the air itself heavy around him. What are you? Shinso asked, backing away from the approaching figure. Izuku didn't answer immediately, focusing instead on maintaining the precarious balance between power expression and control. When he finally spoke, his voice carried absolute conviction. I am a hero in training, and this match is over. With blinding speed, Izuku closed the distance between them. Rather than using flames directly, he employed the enhanced physical capabilities provided by his solar flare state, strength and speed temporarily boosted by precisely controlled internal heat regulation. A single palm strike to Shinso's chest sent the general studies student sliding backward across the concrete until he came to rest outside the boundary line. Shinso is out of bounds. Midoriya advances, midnight announced as the crowd erupted in surprised cheers. The solar flare state dissipated as Izuku exhaled slowly, returning to normal temperature regulation. The technique had proven effective but taxing. Maintaining it for even those brief moments had consumed significant energy reserves. Rather than immediately leaving the arena, Izuku approached Shinso and extended his hand. Your quirk is incredible, he said with genuine respect. In hostage situations or villain negotiations, you could save lives without violence. That's a hero's quirk. Shinso stared at the offered hand in surprise before accepting it. Easy for you to say with your perfect combat quirk, he muttered, though with less bitterness than before. No quirk is perfect, Izuku replied seriously. What matters is how we develop and apply what we have. Keep pushing forward, Shinso. The hero course isn't the only path to becoming a hero. As they exited the arena, the audience's reaction suggested Izuku's display had made an impression beyond the simple victory. Whispers of pressure aura and heat presence rippled through the stands, while several pro heroes could be seen making notes in their observation journals. In the waiting room, Izuku found Katsuki lounging with characteristic nonchalance. "Cutting it close, weren't you?" he commented. "Almost walked right out of bounds like a zombie." "His quirk was more powerful than I anticipated," Izuku admitted, drinking water to rehydrate after the intense quirk usage. "The mental control was nearly absolute until my quirk responded independently." Katsuki's expression sharpened with interest. "Your quirk activated on its own? Without conscious direction?" "It was more like an immune response," Izuku explained thoughtfully. "As if my body recognized the external control as a threat and instinctively used heat generation as a countermeasure." The implications were significant for his understanding of his quirk's nature. If flame generation had autonomic aspects like this, it suggested possibilities beyond conscious application, perhaps emergency response protocols that could activate under extreme conditions. The tournament continued with impressive displays from various competitors. Todoroki's match against Zero ended in seconds with a massive ice structure that dwarfed the stadium itself. Katsuki similarly dominated his opponent with overwhelming offensive pressure. Other matchups showcased the diverse quirk applications that made UA students so formidable. When the second round began, Izuku found himself facing Tokoyami, a challenging opponent whose Dark Shadow quirk offered both offensive and defensive capabilities. The match proved technically demanding, requiring precise flame control to manage Dark Shadow's light sensitivity without causing unnecessary harm to Tokoyami himself. Through careful application of targeted flame bursts rather than overwhelming power, Izuku secured victory by strategically limiting Dark Shadow's movement range until Tokoyami conceded the increasingly one-sided contest. The semi-final matchups were set: Izuku versus Ida and Katsuki versus Todoroki. Each pairing promised spectacular quirk displays and contrasting fighting styles. Ida's Recipro Burst provided early advantage in their match, his extraordinary speed initially overwhelming Izuku's defensive positioning. The engine quirk user had clearly studied Izuku's previous techniques and prepared counters for standard flame applications. Adapting mid-battle, Izuku employed a new combination, using minimal flame on for mobility while incorporating solar flare principles for concentrated impact at key moments. The hybrid approach allowed him to match Ida's speed bursts while conserving energy for decisive exchanges. The turning point came when Ida's engines stalled temporarily from overuse. In that vulnerable moment, Izuku executed a technique he'd conceptualized but never implemented in combat: Sunstep Blitz, a rapid-fire sequence of short-range flame propulsions that created unpredictable movement patterns while maintaining constant offensive pressure. The audience watched in amazement as Izuku seemed to teleport around Ida, flames marking his trajectory in brief flashes as he delivered precisely calculated strikes from multiple angles. When Ida finally collapsed from exhaustion, Midnight declared Izuku the winner, advancing him to the finals. The other semi-final produced unexpected drama when Todoroki, pushed to his absolute limit by Katsuki's relentless assault, finally broke his self-imposed restriction and used his fire abilities. The resulting clash of explosions and dual-element powers created such spectacular visual effects that the audience fell momentarily silent in collective awe. Ultimately, Todoroki's emotional breakthrough compromised his tactical focus, allowing Katsuki to secure a narrow victory through superior combat experience and adaptability. The match ended with Todoroki unconscious and Katsuki advancing to face Izuku in the finals, a matchup both had anticipated since the tournament began. As they prepared for their final confrontation, Izuku and Katsuki exchanged no words in the waiting area. Their shared history made conversation unnecessary. Both understood exactly what this match represented: not just a tournament final, but a milestone in their parallel journeys toward professional heroism. When they took their positions on the tournament stage, the stadium fell hushed with anticipation. These two students had displayed extraordinary quirk mastery throughout the competition, and their contrasting styles, Katsuki's overwhelming offensive pressure versus Izuku's tactical versatility, promised a spectacular conclusion. Begin! Midnight's announcement triggered immediate action from both competitors. Katsuki launched forward with explosive acceleration, right hand already glowing with accumulated nitroglycerin sweat. "Don't you dare hold back, Izuku!" he shouted as he closed distance. Izuku met the charge directly, activating Flame On for maximum mobility as he countered Katsuki's opening salvo with precisely timed defensive bursts. Wouldn't dream of it, Kakin. What followed was less a conventional match than a masterclass in Quirk application. Both young heroes had trained together for years, each intimately familiar with the other's techniques and tendencies. This shared knowledge elevated their exchange beyond simple combat into something approaching collaborative artistry, each movement forcing innovative responses that pushed both participants to their limits. Katsuki's howitzer impact met Izuku's Nova Spiral in mid-air collisions that sent shockwaves throughout the stadium. Aerial maneuvers carried them above the arena in dazzling displays of controlled power, neither maintaining advantage for more than moments before the other countered effectively. "They're not just fighting," Aizawa commented from the teacher's observation booth. "They're problem-solving in real time, adapting to each other's innovations without hesitation." All Might nodded agreement, his permanent smile somehow conveying thoughtful assessment. It's rare to see such technical sophistication in first-year students. Their quirk control suggests development well beyond their age. As the battle approached the 10-minute mark, both competitors showed signs of fatigue. Katsuki's explosions, while still powerful, came with longer intervals between major outputs. Izuku similarly found himself carefully managing diminishing energy reserves, transitioning between flame states with increasing economy of movement. The decisive sequence began with Katsuki's most powerful technique, howitzer impact delivered from maximum height, the spiraling explosion creating a vortex of destructive force as he descended toward Izuku's position. Rather than attempting to match power directly, Izuku executed a technique he'd been developing specifically for this confrontation. Ankai, Blazing Nova, a perfect dome of concentrated flame expanded outward from his position, creating not just a barrier but an active counterpressure zone. When Katsuki's explosion contacted this dome, the result wasn't the expected collision but rather a controlled redirection. The explosive force channeled around the flame barrier in a spectacular display of energy manipulation. As Katsuki's momentum carried him through his own redirected explosion, Izuku transitioned from defensive to offensive in a single fluid motion. The dome collapsed inward before expanding again as a concentrated fire pillar that caught Katsuki mid-recovery, launching him upward with controlled force. "Fire Fist, Flame Emperor," Izuku called, launching himself after the airborne Katsuki with his right arm sheathed in spiraling flame. Recognizing the approaching finisher, Katsuki refused surrender. Despite his compromised position, he managed to orient himself for a desperate counter. AP shot, auto cannon. Multiple concentrated explosions erupted from his palms in rapid succession, creating a defensive barrage against Izuku's approach. The attacks connected simultaneously, Izuku's flame-enhanced strike landing precisely as Katsuki's final explosion detonated between them. The resulting shockwave temporarily obscured both competitors from view, the audience holding collective breath as they waited for resolution. When the smoke cleared, both students were visible at opposite ends of the arena. Katsuki embedded in the boundary wall, Izuku kneeling on the concrete with one arm braced against the ground for support. Both were clearly exhausted, their uniforms damaged and bodies showing signs of the intense exchange. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with visible effort, Izuku pushed himself upright and took a single step forward. Across the arena, Katsuki struggled to extract himself from the crater his impact had created in the wall. Before either could continue, Midnight assessed the situation and made her ruling. Bakugo is out of bounds. Midoriya wins the UA Sports Festival first-year championship. The announcement triggered thunderous applause throughout the stadium, spectators rising to their feet in appreciation of the extraordinary contest they had witnessed. As medical robots approached to assess both finalists, Izuku made his way unsteadily across the arena to where Katsuki was now sitting with his back against the damaged wall. "Good match," Izuku offered simply, extending his hand. Katsuki stared at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it with a grudging nod. "This time," he acknowledged. "Next time will be different." "Looking forward to it," Izuku replied with genuine anticipation. Their rivalry had always pushed both to exceed their previous limitations, and today's match had been no exception. The award ceremony featured All Might himself presenting medals to the top finishers. Bronze to Todoroki, silver to Katsuki, and gold to Izuku. As the symbol of peace placed the medal around his neck, he leaned close to offer private words of praise. Young Midoriya, Your growth has been remarkable, not just in power, but in the judgment with which you apply it. Continue on this path, and your future as a hero is limitless." Those words, coming from the world's greatest hero, filled Izuku with both pride and renewed determination. The sports festival had been an important milestone, but it represented just one step in his journey toward true heroism. That evening, exhausted but satisfied, Izuku found himself reviewing recorded footage of the day's matches. His analytical mind identified numerous areas for improvement despite his overall success: energy efficiency in solar flare transitions, reaction time during aerial recoveries, flame distribution during maximum output techniques. His phone chimed with congratulatory messages from family and friends, including a particularly touching voice message from his mother that brought tears to his eyes. Among the notifications was a simple text from Toshinori Yagi: "Exemplary performance. Meet at Dagoba tomorrow, 7 a.m. Important discussion." The cryptic message piqued Izuku's curiosity, but exhaustion soon overtook analytical interest. As he drifted towards sleep, flames dancing across his fingertips in unconscious expression of his quirk, Izuku reflected on how far he'd come from the uncertain child struggling to control his fire. Yet amid the satisfaction of achievement, a nagging awareness remained. The League of Villains was still active, their attack on USJ suggesting resources and determination beyond ordinary criminal operations. The sports festival had showcased UA students' capabilities to the world, but it had also provided valuable intelligence to potential enemies. "Have to keep improving," Izuku murmured as sleep claimed him. "Have to be ready for whatever comes next." The days following the sports festival brought a welcome break from academic intensity, allowing students to recover from the competition while processing the professional attention it had generated. Izuku's inbox filled with internship offers from hero agencies impressed by his performance, opportunities to gain practical experience under established pros. His early morning meeting with Toshinori at Dagoba Beach, however, provided unexpected perspective on these opportunities. "Young Midoriya," Toshinori began as they walked along the shoreline, "your victory yesterday was well-earned and impressive. The technical sophistication you displayed suggests readiness for the next phase of your development." "Thank you, sir," Izuku replied, curious about the meeting's purpose. "I've received several internship offers already, including some from top agencies." Toshinori nodded thoughtfully. "No doubt. Your quirk versatility and tactical approach make you valuable to many hero operations." He paused, gaunt face becoming serious. "However, I would like to suggest a specific internship that might not be among your most prominent offers." He handed Izuku a business card bearing an unfamiliar hero name: Gran Torino. "Few current students would recognize this name," Toshinori explained, "but Gran Torino is a retired hero of extraordinary capability. He rarely accepts interns, but he has expressed specific interest in your development." Izuku examined the card curiously. "Why me in particular?" A shadow seemed to pass across Toshinori's features. "Gran Torino possesses insights that might prove valuable to your specific quirk evolution. His mobility-based fighting style also complements your recent development patterns." Something in Toshinori's careful phrasing suggested deeper meaning beyond his stated reasons, but Izuku respected his mentor too much to press further. "I'll consider it seriously," he promised, tucking the card into his pocket. As they continued their walk, Toshinori offered additional context about the internship program and its role in hero development. Their conversation eventually turned to the sports festival results and implications for future training. "Your fight with young Bakugo demonstrated extraordinary technical growth," Toshinori noted. "But equally impressive was your interaction with Todoroki during his match with Ida. Your words seemed to have profound impact on his decision to finally use his fire abilities." Izuku hadn't realized Toshinori had observed that private exchange. During a break between matches, he'd approached Todoroki after noticing the dual quirk user's troubled expression following his semi-final loss. "I just told him what someone once told me," Izuku explained, "that a quirk is an extension of oneself, not a separate entity. Rejecting part of your quirk means rejecting part of yourself." Toshinori's thin lips curved into a smile. "Wise beyond your years, young Midoriya. Sometimes the most heroic act isn't defeating villains, but helping others overcome their personal demons." Those words remained with Izuku as he considered his internship options over the following days. Despite receiving offers from prominent agencies like Endeavor, Best Jeanist, and Hawks, He found himself increasingly drawn toward the mysterious Grand Torino option Tashinori had suggested. When final decisions were required, Izuku committed to the Grand Torino internship, trusting his mentor's guidance despite the uncertainty it represented. Katsuki, unsurprisingly, selected Best Jeanist, an established top hero whose combat prowess and public reputation aligned with his ambitions. Other classmates similarly chose agencies matching their development priorities or quirk affinities. The week before internships began, classes resumed with a new focus on practical applications informed by the sports festival results. During one hero training session, All Might announced an additional development: specialized costume upgrades based on their tournament performance. Many of you demonstrated new applications or limitations during the sports festival. The symbol of peace explained. This is an opportunity to request modifications that better support your evolving capabilities. For Izuku, whose costume had been designed around his original quirk applications, the timing was perfect. His recent innovations, particularly Flame On and Solar Flare, created thermal management challenges his current gear wasn't optimized to address. Working with the support department, he developed specifications for a modified costume incorporating temperature-resistant materials with variable permeability. The design included specialized conduits along his arms and legs to channel heat more efficiently during sustained output, plus reinforced palm and sole sections for concentrated flame release during mobility techniques. These modifications should reduce energy waste by approximately 17% during extended flame-on states. He explained to Power Loader, the support department teacher overseeing the upgrades, and the reinforced core insulation will help manage internal temperature regulation during solar flare compression. Power Loader nodded approvingly at the technical specifications. Impressive heat management theory, Midoriya. Most students focus exclusively on offensive enhancements without considering efficiency and sustainability. When the upgraded costumes were delivered days later, Izuku was pleased to find the modifications exceeded his expectations. Test applications confirmed improved thermal efficiency and reduced energy consumption during sustained quirk usage, advantages that would prove valuable during extended hero operations. The day before internships began, Class 1 gathered for final instructions from Aizawa. His typically dispassionate demeanor seemed slightly more solemn as he addressed the students. "Remember that you represent UA during these internships," he emphasized. "You'll be working with professional heroes in real-world situations, not controlled training environments. Exercise appropriate caution and defer to your mentor's judgment regarding villain engagement." He paused, making deliberate eye contact with several students, including Izuku. "Some of you may encounter genuine danger during this experience. While your supervising heroes will prioritize your safety, the unpredictable nature of hero work means risk cannot be eliminated entirely." Something in his tone suggested this wasn't merely standard cautionary advice, but specific concern based on information the teachers possessed. The implication wasn't lost on Izuku, whose analytical mind immediately began considering potential threats that might emerge during their internship period. The following morning, students departed for their respective internship locations across Japan. Izuku's destination, a modest apartment building in an unremarkable neighborhood, seemed incongruous with his expectations of a professional hero agency. The address on Gran Torino's card led to a specific unit on the 3rd floor, its door distinguished only by a small nameplate bearing the retired hero's name. Knocking tentatively, Izuku waited with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. When no response came, he knocked again with greater force, calling, "Hello, Gran Torino, sir? I'm Izuku Midoriya, the intern from UA." Still receiving no answer, concern prompted him to test the door handle, which turned easily, revealing the apartment was unlocked. Stepping cautiously inside, Izuku was met with a disturbing sight: an elderly man lying face down in what appeared to be a puddle of blood. "Sir!" he exclaimed, rushing forward before his analytical brain processed additional details. Specifically, the blood was actually spilled ketchup, and the elderly man was breathing normally despite his dramatic positioning. Before Izuku could reconsider his assessment, the supposedly incapacitated figure suddenly sprang upward with astonishing agility, rebounding off walls and ceiling in a display of mobility that belied his advanced age. "Took you long enough to come in," the elderly hero announced, landing precisely before Izuku with unexpected grace. "What would you have done if I'd been a real victim, Stand outside knocking politely while I bled out. Izuku blinked in confusion at this unorthodox introduction. You're Gran Torino. Who else would I be in my own apartment? The diminutive hero retorted. Now, Toshinori sent you because he thinks I might have something to teach about that flame quirk of yours. Let's see what you've got, boy. Without further warning, Gran Torino launched himself toward Izuku with startling speed, forcing an immediate defensive response. Instinctively, Izuku activated his quirk, creating a flame barrier between himself and the approaching hero. Gran Torino effortlessly altered his trajectory mid-air, bouncing off a wall to approach from a different angle. Too slow, too predictable. Is this what passes for elite training at UA these days? The pattern continued for several minutes, Gran Torino attacking from multiple vectors with extraordinary mobility, while Izuku struggled to establish effective defensive positioning. Despite his recent tournament success, Izuku found himself completely outmatched by the elderly hero's speed and tactical approach. When Gran Torino finally ended the one-sided exchange, Izuku was breathing heavily with minor burns on his costume from his own hastily deployed flames. The retired hero, by contrast, appeared completely unaffected by the exertion. Just as I thought, Gran Torino stated, suddenly serious. You've developed impressive techniques, but your fundamental movement application is inefficient. You're still thinking about your quirk as something you activate rather than something you embody. The assessment struck Izuku as both accurate and insightful. Despite his recent innovations like Flame On, he still conceptualized his quirk as a tool to be deployed rather than an integrated aspect of his physical existence. Your internship will focus on reconceptualizing your relationship with your flames, Gran Torino continued. By the time you leave here, fire won't be something you use. It will be something you are. The cryptic statement set the tone for what would prove the most transformative week of Izuku's hero education thus far. Gran Torino's teaching methods were unorthodox to the point of seeming random, one moment demanding precision flame control exercises, the next engaging in high-speed pursuit through urban environments, then suddenly pausing everything for extended philosophical discussions about quirk theory. Through this seemingly chaotic approach, however, Izuku gradually discerned the underlying methodology. Gran Torino was systematically deconstructing his established patterns, forcing him to respond instinctively rather than analytically. Your brain works too much, the elderly hero complained during one particularly intense training session. Fire doesn't think. It reacts, adapts, flows. You're still trying to intellectualize something that should be as natural as breathing. To demonstrate his point, Gran Torino blindfolded Izuku and created increasingly complex obstacle courses through which he had to navigate using only his quirk's sensory feedback, the subtle variations in air temperature and pressure that his flames could detect. Initially, Izuku crashed repeatedly, accumulating bruises and minor burns as he struggled to interpret these unfamiliar sensory inputs. Gradually, however, his perception expanded beyond visual reliance, his flames becoming extended sensory organs that provided three-dimensional awareness of his surroundings. By the fourth day, Izuku could navigate Gran Torino's apartment blindfolded while maintaining continuous flame output, a seemingly simple achievement that represented profound reconceptualization of his quirk's fundamental nature. Better, Gran Torino acknowledged gruffly. Now we move to Phase 2 real-world application. That evening, they departed the apartment for patrol through a nearby commercial district. Unlike standard hero patrols with their high visibility and public relations components, Gran Torino emphasized inconspicuous movement and environmental awareness. Most villain encounters aren't announced with convenient declarations of evil intent, he explained as they traversed rooftops. They're opportunistic situations where immediate response determines outcomes. Your ability to transition instantly from civilian to hero state, without elaborate preparation or announcement, can mean the difference between life and death. Throughout the patrol, Gran Torino created surprise scenarios, subtle simulations of developing criminal activity that required Izuku to identify, assess, and respond without explicit instruction. Each scenario tested different aspects of hero work: civilian protection, property preservation, threat neutralization, and crisis communication. Your combat capabilities are already above average for your age, Gran Torino noted during a brief rest period. What needs development is your transition efficiency and situational adaptability. A hero who can only function optimally under ideal conditions isn't ready for professional work. The observation resonated with Izuku's experiences during the USJ attack, where theoretical preparation had proven necessary but insufficient against unexpected threats. Real heroism required not just power and technique, but instantaneous application of both under suboptimal conditions. Their patrol concluded without actual villain encounters, but the simulated scenarios provided valuable practical context for the abstract principles Gran Torino had emphasized during training. Returning to the apartment late that night, Izuku felt both physically exhausted and mentally stimulated, his understanding of professional heroism expanding beyond academic concepts into lived experience. The following morning brought unexpected development when Gran Torino received a phone call that visibly concerned him. After a brief, cryptic conversation, he turned to Izuku with uncharacteristic seriousness. "Change of plans today. Pack your hero costume. We're taking a trip to Hosu City." The abrupt announcement raised questions, but Gran Torino offered minimal explanation beyond operational necessity. "Hero agencies occasionally coordinate on significant threats," he stated as they boarded the train. "An old colleague has requested consultation regarding recent incidents in Hosu." During the journey, Izuku noticed Gran Torino reviewing news reports about a series of hero assaults in various cities, each featuring similar wound patterns and victim selection criteria. The pattern suggested a methodical perpetrator with specific targeting priorities, a disturbing contrast to the chaotic opportunism of most villain activity. "The hero killer," Izuku murmured, recognizing the case details from hero forums he followed. "Stain. He's attacked 17 pros so far, killing 4 and permanently injuring 7 others." Gran Torino glanced up from his tablet. "You're well informed. I study hero cases," Izuku explained. "Stain's methodology is distinctive. He specifically targets heroes he considers fake, according to some personal criteria. His quirk appears blood-related based on survivor accounts, possibly paralysis induction through ingestion." The elderly hero's expression suggested reassessment of Izuku's capabilities. "Correct on all counts. Hosu experienced an attack 3 days ago, and intelligence suggests Stain remains in the area. Multiple agencies are coordinating search operations." This information cast their sudden trip in more serious light. Rather than a training exercise, they were potentially entering an active manhunt for one of Japan's most dangerous villains. "Will we be participating in the search?" Izuku asked, both concerned and intrigued by the possibility. Gran Torino shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. Our role is strictly consultative. I'm meeting with the local commander to provide historical context from similar cases. You'll remain with me at all times, observing professional coordination procedures without direct involvement." The emphasis on non-participation was clear, but something in Gran Torino's tone suggested he anticipated complications despite these precautions. The unsettling implication remained with Izuku as their train approached Hosu City Station late that afternoon. Disembarking into the crowded transit hub, they made their way toward the local hero agency that was coordinating search operations. They had traveled approximately 3 blocks when multiple explosions erupted across the cityscape, immediately followed by emergency sirens and civilian panic. "Nomu!" someone shouted from the direction of the disturbance. "It's those monsters from the USJ attack." The information sent a chill through Izuku. If Nomu were involved, it suggested League of Villains activity coordinated with Stain's presence, a disturbing tactical escalation that indicated sophisticated planning. Gran Torino's expression hardened as he assessed the developing situation. "Change of plans. This is now an active crisis response." He fixed Izuku with a stern gaze. "You are authorized for defensive support only, civilian protection and evacuation assistance. No direct engagement with Nomu entities under any circumstances." "Understood." Izuku nodded, already activating his costume's deployment system beneath his civilian clothes. "Understood, sir. Stay within visual contact unless directly ordered otherwise." Gran Torino continued as they moved toward the disturbance. "These creatures are beyond first-year student capabilities, regardless of your festival performance." The warning was unnecessary. Izuku's USJ experience had provided first-hand understanding of Nomu capabilities. As they reached the crisis zone, the situation became clearer. 3 Nomu-like entities were causing widespread destruction while pro-heroes attempted containment with limited success. Unlike the USJ Nomu, these specimens appeared less physically imposing but demonstrated specialized adaptations. One with wings engaged in aerial attacks, another with elongated limbs grappled with ground-based heroes, while the third employed some form of corrosive secretion that damaged buildings and infrastructure. Gran Torino immediately joined the professional response, his extraordinary mobility making him effective against the winged Nomu despite his advanced age. Evacuation support, Eastern Quadrant, he called to Izuku before launching himself into combat. Following these instructions, Izuku focused on civilian extraction from damaged buildings, using controlled flame outputs to clear debris and create evacuation paths. His recent training with Gran Torino proved immediately valuable, the enhanced environmental awareness allowing precise Quirk application even amid chaos and limited visibility. For nearly 20 minutes, Izuku maintained disciplined focus on his assigned role, successfully evacuating dozens of civilians from collapsed zones, while professional heroes engaged the Nomu directly. The situation appeared to be stabilizing when an emergency alert appeared on his hero communicator. A distress signal from another UA intern. The source coordinates indicated a location several blocks from the main disturbance, a narrow alley away from the coordinated professional response. More concerning was the signal's origin. Tenya Ida, whose internship was also based in Hosu City. Izuku faced immediate ethical conflict. His instructions were explicit: maintain visual contact with Gran Torino and focus on civilian evacuation. Yet a fellow student was potentially in life-threatening danger, and the professional heroes were fully engaged with the Nomu threat. The decision crystallized instantly. Ida's safety took priority over procedural compliance. Using his communicator, Izuku sent his location and intended destination to Gran Torino with a brief explanation before activating Flame On and launching himself toward the distress coordinates. The journey took less than a minute at maximum propulsion, flames streamlining around his body as he navigated between buildings with precision born from intensive training. As he approached the alley indicated in Ida's signal, Izuku extinguished his external flames and landed silently at the entrance, prioritizing tactical assessment before engagement. The scene that greeted him confirmed his worst fears. Ida lay paralyzed on the ground, bleeding from multiple lacerations, while a figure matching Stain's description stood over him with a serrated blade. A third individual, the pro-hero native, was similarly immobilized against a wall, his costume torn and bloodied from what appeared to be torture-like interrogation. False heroes pollute the society, Stain was saying, his raspy voice carrying clearly in the confined space. Pretenders who chase fame and fortune while wearing the mantle of heroism. You, engine boy, sought personal vengeance rather than justice, the clearest evidence of your unfitness to bear the title hero. The villain raised his blade, clearly preparing to deliver a fatal strike to the immobilized Ida. Time seemed to slow as Izuku processed the situation. Direct confrontation with a villain who had defeated multiple professional heroes, two incapacitated individuals requiring immediate protection, no professional backup within response range. In that critical moment, everything Gran Torino had emphasized during their training coalesced into crystal clarity. Without conscious thought, Izuku's quirk activated in its most appropriate configuration for the scenario. Not Flame On for mobility or Solar Flare for precision, but a hybrid state combining elements of both. Phoenix Flame, he named the technique as golden flames erupted around his body, concentrated primarily along his spine and major muscle groups, while leaving his extremities relatively cool for precision manipulation. The sudden illumination caught Stain's attention, causing him to abort his killing strike and turn toward the alley entrance. What he saw clearly gave him pause. A young hero silhouetted by golden flames that cast stark shadows throughout the narrow space, creating an almost mythological impression of divine judgment. "Step away from them," Izuku commanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. The flames intensified slightly with his words, responding to emotional state without conscious direction. Exactly the integration Gran Torino had emphasized. Stain's expression shifted from surprise to calculating assessment. Another child playing hero? Or perhaps? His eyes narrowed as he studied Izuku more carefully. "No, there's something different about you. Your eyes don't hold the emptiness of those false heroes." "I won't ask again," Izuku stated, advancing slowly into the alley with measured steps. Each footfall left momentary scorch marks on the concrete, the controlled heat creating a psychological impression of overwhelming power despite its actually precise limitation. "Release them from your quirk immediately." A disturbing smile spread across Stain's face, revealing sharpened teeth. "You think you can command me, the hero killer? I've slaughtered pros with decades more experience than you possess, child." Without warning, he launched himself forward with frightening speed, blades positioned for a simultaneous attack against throat and abdomen. a combination that had presumably ended several professional careers. Rather than attempting to dodge, which would leave Ida and Native exposed, Izuku stood his ground. At the precise moment Stain committed to his attack vector, Izuku executed the technique he'd been refining throughout his internship. Fire Fist, Flame Emperor. Concentrated flame erupted from his right arm, forming not just an exterior sheath, but a complex vortex pattern that created both offensive and defensive capabilities simultaneously. When Stain's blades contacted this superheated spiral, they encountered not solid resistance but calculated thermal management that softened metal without completely melting it, rendering the weapons temporarily malleable rather than immediately destroyed. The technical precision required for this outcome represented everything Izuku had learned about temperature regulation and material interaction. Not maximum destruction, but controlled neutralization with minimal collateral effect. Stain's momentum carried him past Izuku's position, his compromised weapons leaving him momentarily vulnerable. Capitalizing on this opening, Izuku executed a flame-enhanced roundhouse kick that connected solidly with the villain's torso, sending him sprawling deeper into the alley. Ida, Izuku called without taking his eyes off Stain. What's the activation mechanism for his paralysis quirk? Blood ingestion, Ida managed through immobile lips. He licks blood from his weapons to trigger the effect. Duration varies based on blood type. The information confirmed Izuku's earlier research while providing crucial tactical parameters. Neutralizing Stain's quirk meant preventing blood collection or ingestion, objectives that aligned perfectly with fire-based crowd control. Stain recovered quickly, discarding his compromised blades and drawing fresh weapons from his extensive arsenal. Impressive technique, he acknowledged with disturbing enthusiasm. Perhaps you're one of the few worthy of the title hero after all. Let's find out. He charged again, this time employing erratic movement patterns designed to create multiple attack vectors simultaneously. The approach would have overwhelmed most opponents, but Izuku's recent training with Grand Torino had specifically addressed multi-vector threats. Maintaining the Phoenix flame state, Izuku matched Stain's mobility with controlled flame bursts that positioned him protectively between the villain and his incapacitated victims. Rather than engaging directly, he employed defensive counters that gradually restricted Stain's movement options while awaiting professional reinforcement. You're holding back, Stain observed during a momentary disengagement, protecting those weaklings rather than fighting at full capacity. Interesting priority. That's what heroes do, Izuku replied simply, flames pulsing with his heartbeat. Protect others before themselves. Something resembling respect flickered across Stain's face. A child lecturing me on heroism? Perhaps there's hope for this corrupt society after all. Their exchange resumed with increased intensity, Stain's experience and specialized training meeting Izuku's evolving quirk application and tactical adaptation. While the villain possessed superior combat skills, Izuku's flame control created environmental advantages that partially neutralized this disparity. The battle reached critical threshold when Stain executed a feint that momentarily breached Izuku's defensive positioning, creating an opening for a potentially fatal strike against the still paralyzed Ida. In that desperate moment, Izuku employed a technique he'd conceptualized but never implemented in actual combat. Nova Spiral, compressing flame energy into a rotating drill-like formation. He created a controlled piercing force that intercepted Stain's blade arm mid-strike. The technique didn't damage the limb severely but disrupted joint functionality through precisely calculated thermal application, essentially creating temporary immobility through targeted heat shock to specific muscle groups. As Stain recoiled from this unexpected counter, the alley suddenly brightened with approaching flames from above. Gran Torino had finally arrived, followed closely by the pro-hero Endeavor, whose overwhelming firepower immediately altered the tactical situation. Recognizing his position had become untenable, Stain attempted tactical withdrawal, only to find his escape routes systematically closed by coordinated pro-hero positioning. Within minutes, the hero killer was subdued through combined efforts, though not before delivering a disturbing ideological monologue that would later circulate widely through media channels. In the aftermath, as medical attention was administered to Ida and Native, Gran Torino approached Izuku with an expression balanced between disapproval and reluctant pride. You directly contravened instructions regarding villain engagement, the elderly hero noted severely. Yes, sir, Izuku acknowledged, preparing to accept whatever consequences his actions warranted. Gran Torino maintained his stern expression for another moment before unexpectedly sighing. And in doing so, You likely saved 2 lives while demonstrating exactly the quirk integration we've been developing all week. His weathered face softened slightly. Sometimes the right choice means breaking the rules, young Midoriya. The challenge is knowing when those moments occur. The official report would later acknowledge that Izuku's intervention had been instrumental in preventing fatalities while minimizing collateral damage. His precise quirk control allowing effective villain containment without endangering the incapacitated victims or surrounding infrastructure. At the hospital where Ida received treatment for his injuries, the engine quirk user expressed profound gratitude mixed with shame for his vengeful motivations. "I lost sight of what it means to be a hero," he admitted quietly. "My brother's injury consumed me until I was acting from hatred rather than duty." "We all have personal motivations," Izuku replied thoughtfully. "What matters is recognizing when they're leading us astray and finding our way back to true heroism." The conversation marked a significant evolution in their friendship, a shared experience that transcended classroom camaraderie into something forged through genuine life-threatening adversity. When the internship week concluded, Izuku returned to UA with far more than technical improvements. Beyond the substantial quirk development and combat experience, he carried deeper understanding of heroism's fundamental nature. Not just power application, but the judgment, courage, and unwavering commitment to others that separated true heroes from mere quirk users. During the post-internship debriefing session, Aizawa assessed each student's experience with his characteristic directness. When Izuku's turn came, the homeroom teacher's evaluation was unusually detailed. "Your encounter with the hero killer demonstrated both technical proficiency and significant judgment flaws," he stated bluntly. "The decision to engage an S-class villain without proper authorization created unnecessary risk, regardless of the positive outcome." He paused, expression softening almost imperceptibly. "However, your quirk application showed remarkable precision and restraint given the circumstances. Neutralizing the threat while prioritizing victim safety reflects proper hero priorities." Gran Torino's final assessment indicates exceptional growth during your internship period. Coming from Aizawa, this qualified praise represented significant acknowledgement. As the debriefing concluded, he added a final observation that resonated deeply with Izuku's recent experiences. "Remember that heroism isn't measured by the villains you defeat, but by the lives you protect in the process. Power without compassion creates warriors, not heroes." Those words echoed in Izuku's mind as he walked home that evening, the setting sun casting long shadows that reminded him of the alley where he'd confronted his first true villain. The encounter had tested not just his quirk's capability, but his fundamental understanding of heroism itself. Fire had always been viewed primarily as destructive, a force that consumed and destroyed. Yet through dedicated development and ethical application, Izuku had transformed his flames into instruments of protection, precision, and life preservation. The journey from fearful child struggling with control to confident hero in training had been long and often difficult, but each step had contributed to his current path. As darkness fell and streetlights illuminated his way home, Izuku created a small flame in his palm, not for combat or mobility, but simply as an expression of the quirk that had become so intrinsically part of his identity. The fire danced with his breathing, responding to subtle emotional shifts without conscious direction. Exactly the integration Gran Torino had emphasized throughout their training. "A hero's quirk is just a tool," Izuku murmured, watching the flame's gentle movements. "It's the heart behind it that truly matters." With that quiet affirmation, he continued homeward, the small flame illuminating his path through the gathering darkness. A fitting metaphor for the journey still ahead and the greater challenges yet to come. And just like that, Deku's fire has found new form. But it's not about power, it's about will, and his just lit up the whole battlefield. If you felt that flame building, show some love, smash that like button. 150 likes within 24 hours gets us part 3. Drop your favorite move or moment in the comments, subscribe, and join the ChronoCrew Legends, where every story burns brighter. This is your timeline. This is our journey. And it's just getting hotter. See you in the next episode. Until then, keep the fire alive.